Joining me, Ryan. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. Starting out, I'll do a quick little introduction and then give you a chance to just say anything else that you want to add. Ryan Fortman is here with me today. He's the Director, Human Resources Business Partner with the Go-to-Market business at New Relic. And Ryan has nearly 20 years of experience in human resources and is passionate about working smarter by using data and innovative thinking.
Well, and definitely good to be here with you. I know we've interacted over the years and have built a good network in our connections. And but definitely, I really enjoy what I do, especially enjoy where I work, and that's for sure. I have no interest in doing anything that's quote unquote traditional. So I'm looking forward to this discussion.
Awesome. Well, first, I wanted to start by talking about the HRBP or HR Business Partner title. I know
Mhm.
it's something you're particularly passionate about. So, can you talk about the difference between HRBP and then maybe an HR generalist or specialist?
Yeah. Um, it's interesting because when I think of an HRBP, it's a business professional with a people concentration. So it's not the other way around. Whereas when we think about an HR generalist, you're skilled across the traditional and the transactional outputs within the offering of an HR department. And with an HRBP, you should really comprehend um, really not only the business, but you need to understand the business in such a way where you can advise those who you support. That's the differentiator. And so, we're battle tested in the field when it comes to HR, but now we're directing the HR infantries, if you will, in an effort to advise and to help the business out. So it's a great foundation, I find, with the HR generalist, but you really have to step into that business mode. And you have to be reminded that you're also an HR professional because you get so embedded into the business that you envelop those different things that you really enjoy. So that's a key difference. Business first, with some rigor versus someone that's really has a rigor and may be in support of working with the business partner as a conduit or like a center of excellence.
Mhm. And then one of the things that I've seen you talk about online is there's four things that you think are really important for an HRBP to know. Can you talk about those and why you think they're so important?
Yeah, I I found and I've developed these over the years of working, and I really think it came down to just fundamentals. The number one thing that we have to realize and understand is know how your company makes money. At the end of the day, every business is trying to make money. Do you understand how they're going to make money? So you have to understand that. You have to know and understand what your company's short term and their long term goals are. And I've likened it, for example, like if I'm taking a road trip and I know my final destination is 300 miles away, I know that my short term goals are going to include me stopping off to make sure I have enough fuel. I'm going to stop off maybe to get a bite to eat, or maybe perhaps to take a bio break. Those are short term goals. My ultimate long term goal is to arrive to my destination, and then whatever it is I plan on participating in or achieving at my destination. So do you understand that? Do you understand short term to get to the long term destination of where your company wants to go? The other thing is that I think is important, you have to build business comprehension to know where your company stands fiscally. So I was very fortunate to have be mentored by one of my leaders, CFO, that really helped me to appreciate that when I see the financial numbers, like just as if it speaks to a sales professional, they know what to do with those financial numbers, that same piece of information. It tells a marketing person how to work, tells the financial person how to work. As an HR professional, as a business partner, I should be able to look at that and understand what the ripple effect is across the business and how I'm positioned to help the business strategically. And then to know and understand how critical business partner support all those steps. So there's a lot of connected tissue in a business. So you have to understand the ecosystem. You have to understand that when certain things are present in the ecosystem, how it helps it to thrive. And if certain things are missing from the ecosystem, how it can cause it to die. So you have to understand that across the business. And unfortunately, a lot of people, or I've come across in talking to folks, that maybe they don't understand all those attributes and why it's important and how it makes you an indispensable HR business partner.
Awesome. And then when you're thinking about being an HRBP, strategy is really important. What are some of the pieces of building that you think
Mhm.
are critical?
Well, again, number one, it all comes down to when I'm building that strategy, how does my company make money and how are we going to make money this year? So everyone has a different approach every year, but the goals remains the same. How are we going to make money and press toward that? So a lot of times before I even sit down to do my strategy, again, I have to go back out to that ecosystem. So who are my partners? Who are the people in the financial areas? The business itself. What are some of those strategic planning pieces of data that we need to understand the landscape before we can even get to part of a strategy? So one of the first things that I do is I need to understand what that goal is, partner with my financial folks, partner with my business partners and the executives. I partner with the various other pieces of the organization to find out what direction are we going. So I need to get a good lay of the land, first. And then I take that information and I start chewing on it myself. But then I also take it upon myself to go to certain business partners to do what I call an intake to understand what those goals are. Why? Who are the interdependencies? What ecosystem and stakeholders are they working with? Which processes are they dependent on? What systems are they dependent upon for their success or and so forth? So, and also key dates, key milestones, things like that. And I try to put it all together. If I'm fortunate in the sense that I support different areas of the business, I can then look holistically across the organization and see where the interdependencies are. Because in a lot of ways, as a business partner, you're supporting hundreds and hundreds of people. You're only one person. So you have to work very smart. So in some ways, looking across the organization to see where that connective tissue is, you can take a step back and approach it in an 80-20 format and see where there's common denominators to combine your strategy. So that way the work that you're doing is not just benefiting one business, but it's really impacting all the businesses that you support. And at the same time, it's pressing toward the company's finished goal of making money for that year. So all of that culminates into different things. But I also believe that you have to set data metrics because you need binary information to let you know if you are achieving your goals. You should definitively know yes, no, or a metric, period. And so I always try to find metrics that I can answer yes, no, or a specific number. And then I document all this and I set up my dashboards so I can check my wellness, pivot where I need to pivot, be able to have right conversations, look across the ecosystem to make sure that we're still on course to reach our final destination.
And then when you actually do goal setting, what is your favorite type of goal setting and what processes do you go through to set those goals for your company?
So again, even when it's whether it's myself or let's just say I'm doing it with my team, one of the things that I like to do with my team is work off of a document where we're trying to have one source of truth. So, for example, somebody on my team might be supporting an area of the business. They might have a set of presentations that are part of the strat planning with the executives they work with. Maybe another business partner, the same thing. And then I have a data person that is a partner to us. Well, we try to first put all of our pieces to the puzzle in there so we can review it and start to work together and massage one single process. But the other thing that's really imperative and really key is that the organizations usually set out some type of goal setting or objective for the entire organization
Mm-hmm.
for the company. And what I found is, especially and sometimes you know how it is in HR areas, certain HR topics are not going to get the critical mass that they deserve because they're quote unquote HR topics. However, if you're cognizant of what the company goals are, the objectives, and where they're going, and you can somehow put your goals that harmonize with that, you can get critical mass that you deserve. I sort of think of it like, for example, when you see a child that doesn't like vegetables, but they like sweet things. So there's a fruit smoothie, and you put all kinds of vegetables in a fruit smoothie, and they're none the wiser. So in some cases, looking at goal setting, if you're going to get critical mass from major stakeholders that may not see the wisdom behind what you're doing, that's okay. You can't get your feelings hurt, but you can set goals that harmonize with their overall goals, help them make money. You get the critical mass that you need, and then you can display the commercial, which is the benefit of these goal settings. So that's one of the things I try to do. So that way I'm always tying it back to their success with the overall corporate goals. And I generally find that harmonizing them that way will get me the credibility that I need, that when I do need them to finally focus on an HR goal, I have their buy-in, I have the credibility, I have the trust built up.
Yeah, that's awesome. In my last role, we used objectives and key results, OKRs.
Yep.
And that just aligns with exactly what you're saying, because there's the overarching goals that the company has, and we would know what we wanted to work on, and it was all about how does that fit into the company goals, and that's how you get the buy-in from the rest of the company, because
Absolutely.
it
I
helps
mean,
you achieve.
Relic, that's what we do actually. We have OKRs as an organization. And what that allows you to do is you instead of you working in silos, now you're working as an organization.
Right.
And that's what I really enjoy. So it gives me a chance to even work across my peer group in the areas that I don't support, for example. And it gets all of us pulling in the same direction instead of in silos, but pulling together as a unit. And so at New Relic, that's what we have done, and I enjoy that, and it harmonizes really well.
Awesome. Yeah. Switching gears a little bit, let's talk about company culture. So, how do you think that HR can impact company culture? And then, how do you think company culture impacts the work you do as HR?
Well, and I've often talked about this. One of the first things yeah, you have to understand, at least for me, how does a person define culture? And at least for me personally and professionally, how I define culture is when I or employees or my coworkers or my leadership are left to their own devices, what do they do?
Mm-hmm.
And what is allowed to happen? And in some respects, that could be one indicator that that's culture. So there's a different means of that's a culture, whether we created it, good, bad, or indifferent, it is a part of culture. Now, from an HR standpoint, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. Without the lack of intimacy of understanding and having that connection with the leadership, but more so the values of the organization first, and then having an intimacy to see if there's a connection, you're not going to really kind of impact that culture. One of the things that I found, and I'm sure you found this in your career, is people have mission, vision, and values, but all they are words on the internet and on a poster on a wall inside the office. They don't harmonize, and so that's one of the things that, as from that, one of the first things I look at. And New Relic, one of the things that I really enjoy is that we're very deliberate in how we're trying to look at our culture, because we have a certain set of values. And if we believe in those values and that culture, the byproduct is certain success, not the other way around. Because there's certain attributes that we're looking for, and that should be a part of your culture, not a perk, your culture. That if these things are really resident in somebody's ethos, it's gonna really help the company to thrive. So that's one piece of it. So systematically, there is a way you can do that. One, you got to collect the data, but it's not just engagement data. It could be pulse data. It can be a combination of things. I don't think there's a magic pill or a bullet or a single source. I think it's a combination of things. I think it's also a different way of noticing how the company is responding, culturally, to where you can start to focus on it. But also, what does culture mean if I'm a technical professional? What does culture mean if I'm a field salesperson? What does culture mean if I'm a G&A person that's used to just working, doing my role and my responsibility and have to be there at month end and so forth and quarter end? What does culture mean to me? So there's culture within these little microcosms of culture, but company culture, how can you bridge those together? And honestly, it's like you can hold it for a little bit, but you got to keep watching. You got to keep watching it as well. Um, so I'm not sure if you can pinpoint exactly one piece of it. And then two, a singular leader can be a magnet for culture, but if that person is not present, what happens to the culture? And so those are questions that we ask about as well. Is even what will that essence of what that person promoted and inspired, would it still exist if that person was here or not? And is that also culture? And maybe it is, maybe it's not. So it's I don't know if there's a singular way of looking at it, but I do believe that you can't get comfortable with it. You got to constantly look at it.
Mhm. And you talked a little bit about, doing a pulse survey or different data you can collect. What would you say? I mean, I agree. I think you have to collect all different kinds of data to really paint a true picture. But what if you could pick maybe like three different things that you would do to
Mm-hmm.
determine your company culture? What do you think that would be?
Well, first of all, if I'm going to collect data, I would like to kind of benchmark it to something for starters. Um, but I just don't want to benchmark it with anything. And what I benchmark, it needs to be able to engage and mobilize people. It can't just be collecting data to be collecting data. And so what I would say is you need to be very, very selective of who you partner with. The resources of a survey company, um, they're not all created equal. That's for starters. And you get what you pay for. You get what you pay for. So one of the first things I would do is if a company is really serious about that, they have to be willing to, in my opinion, to pay the money to, because the return on investment to be able to unlock what motivates and engages people and makes them think twice about leaving your organization is money well spent. So that's one of the first things I would do is be very finicky in selecting a partner for a survey. So that's first of all. And the reason why I would do that is because a lot of times these are people that are experts as well, and it can offer you insights that and on blind spots that you're not even thinking about. So that's one of the first things I would do is find a great partner that is not going to just give me a tool and let me figure out and give me some type of template and a checklist to do the analysis.
Mhm.
I that's a given. But when I have had the most impact, I have partnered with organizations that have had data scientists, and different statisticians that worked with me. In fact, I still have a relationship with one, and by chance at one of the conferences, HR conferences, um, um, Jeremy Whelan, who is a pretty accomplished data professional, but he was one of the consultants that I worked with when he was in one of these engagement surveys. But again, my point being is that that's one of the first things I would do. Number two, um, if your executive management is not bought in or is willing to put some skin in the game or is willing to hold people accountable, and I found even better if they tied into and as a part of their incentives and a part of what impacts their pay to get their attention, you'd be surprised of how much you can help with that process because they're being held accountable. Sometimes leaders I find differentiate between being a leader of their discipline, being a leader of people, and the other things that come and encompass that. And they're not different, they're combined. So again, great partner, getting executive buy-in, and then also measuring and being accountable to the masses and speaking to what you're doing, and having that credibility. So being transparent, accountability, having a great partner.
Awesome. And when you talk about transparency, are you a fan of sharing that with the whole company?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. In my past life, even at New Relic, we're very transparent with the information and we don't spin it. If there's an area that we need to work on, we'll own it. We'll own it. And that's that's okay. Um, I would actually be worried if a survey was too perfect
Mhm.
because are we getting comfortable? Are we going to challenge ourselves? I mean, and like COVID, for example, has really turned everybody's way of working on its ear. So I believe you have to be transparent because if you don't, what I have found when companies aren't transparent or they say they're doing things, the next survey is just rosy. Everything is fine and there's no comments and it's just data points, neutral, or they're good enough to say, yep, everything is fine. And then all of a sudden attrition says otherwise.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think you have to be transparent, but accountable and follow through.
Awesome. Um, One of the things that you list as something that you're passionate about on LinkedIn is experiential mentorship. Can
Mhm.
you tell us what that means and why it's important to you?
Yeah, I love learning. I love teaching, and so like for example, if you work for me, and if I hire you because you have a specific skill set and should be able to do what you're going to do. And even if I know how to do things, unless it's going to put us in dramatic, you're going to do something that's going to put us in dramatic harm's way, then maybe I step in. But I think experiential, in a sense that you let people make decisions, you understand why they're making decisions and you help shape their thinking so they're not making a decision based upon you, but they're developing their own way. They don't have to do things exactly my way. Even when I'm mentoring people, I ask a lot of questions to kind of probe, to throw a few things, put some scenarios in front of them, to really help them to understand, give them some homework, and then kind of do a cross compare. Because I don't want to discourage them, but I need them to understand so that they can be built up with fire resistant materials. So that's my goal of experiential. When in our profession, as there's times where most times everything is fine, and then there's a crisis. And without that experiential training and mentorship, a person, if you're it is not going to be able to stand the test that fire. So I do, when there's certain situations that will put pressure, the right kind of pressure, I will put them in that heat. I'll be close by if they need to, but even if they need me, I'm not going to solve it all the time. I'm going to help them to kind of really think out the process and get confident in their skill sets because they have it, and it helps shore them up in those ways. I think that's really important. So one example that I'll give you is that I have an employee on my team, and he has a goal. He wants to go into HR business partnership, and right now he leads our practice on in another area. And so we have two types of one-on-ones. One-on-one he owns. It's basically what we do. And then there's a one-on-one that I own, but it's about his development. So we're talking about things that have in some cases nothing to do with HR. It's about the business. Understanding, like for instance, in our area, how do we get sales? What does our business do? What value do we add? Why is this business so important? And then connecting the dots back to how it helps us in our world. So that way now when you're operating with a business person, they could see that experientially or with your experience, you understand the business, you understand what's going on. And now when you're introducing things that are in your expert area, in most cases, you have that credibility because you understand their world and your solutions are intersecting. So some leaders don't take the time to do that. I think that's a mistake. And the same thing, I often talk with a few folks that are young in their career, and we get a chance to get together maybe monthly. And the same thing, I treat them through experiential, mentorship, give them some homework, ask them some things about their company, see what they can tell me when they come back. And I said, I'll do my homework just like you. And then they'll see some things, and I'll ask them a few questions, and then I'll be like, well, what about this? And what about that? Ask them some more questions, and I'll be like, okay, let me see what I found. And then to kind of help them to connect the dots. So I think it's really important. I love doing it.
Nice. That's awesome. Um, Another thing that I've heard you talk about is the idea that sometimes as an HR person, that your voice can be impacted due to the responsibilities of the position. How do you know when it's okay to speak up and say your opinion, or when sometimes you have to keep your opinion to yourself because of the role that you hold with the company? And do you think that affects you becoming your authentic self at work?
You know, at times it's very frustrating. Um, as a HR, we are the stewards of compliance, and we have to be very careful. And at times we're employees just like anyone else. We have the same frustration. We have different belief systems, um, and at times it can be frustrating, because you can't express that because you could put the company in a serious situation of liability, and we're cognizant of that. And so you sometimes have to make peace with that and accept that. And there's sometimes you just don't want to. So there could be social issues, for example, where you have to be very careful. There's one way of working through social issues by taking and working through things in an appropriate way, but it calls for a great deal of humility, patience, and you can't be prideful. And I can't tell you, I've seen so many other HR folks that have crossed that line, and now it can put into jeopardy a lot of different things that we do. So one of the things that I found, that helps me out is there's ways of using data and making it business, um, like I'll put it this way: I can't change the morality of an organization or a company. um, I can help them to appreciate certain things and why doing certain things within a corporate environment is good for business, and that it's good for their credibility, and it's good for the organization as a whole. So there's certain things that yes, you can be vocal on, but you have to be really, really careful, and it's really hard. I think this last year I struggled more than ever with it, and even especially whether it's a matter of spirituality, whether it's a matter of social justice, um, or whether it's opinions that are happening in just day to day matters that are on the news. You have to be extremely careful, and you have to know your audience because you can be in a liability. So one of the things I think that helps me is really connecting with my other HR colleagues within my team, because they understand that in our world, and we it is kind of a safe place where we can speak amongst ourselves and feel okay, because that's not always the case that's there. So if you have the benefit of having other HR colleagues, that might be one way you can do it. And if not, you may need to find your other outlets to be able to do that outside of the organization. I also find it really hard too because I like to write. Um, and you have to be careful. I have had to edit certain things because maybe um, something was brought to my attention that it could, it could perhaps cause liability, or it can appear or make matters worse for the company or something like that. And that's tough. There's no other way of putting it. It's tough. And so, especially because you're like, that's my identity. You're telling me to censor myself, and that's not that it is a form of censorship, but at the same time I get it, and I have to be mature about that as well, and or figure out other ways to express myself in a night in a good way that's not going to get me into trouble. But it's hard, and I think that most HR professionals would agree with that. It's pretty tough. It's pretty tough.
Do you think that there are companies out there that, are more open to having employees talk about things like religion and politics and social justice, that where they can
Mhm.
be their authentic selves and have
Oh yeah, for sure.
dialogues? Like, what do you think is a
New
way?
Relic for sure. I will tell you, I have never worked at a place like New Relic. Um, I feel that I can speak on topics authentically, and that's one of the things that I feel personally as a point of retention is one of the many things that helps me that keeps me there. But
Mhm,
it also makes it a destination for people who are often looked at as different.
mhm,
um, and whether it be social, whether it be perhaps you're a person of color, or for spiritual viewpoints, whatever the case may be, I find it's a great place to work. A lot of companies are at a crossroads over these last few months to decide if they're going to let people be authentic. But that's one of the biggest reasons. That's the main reason why I'm at my company, is because we believe that if you're your authentic self, you'll do your best work because you can be yourself. So I can show up in a t-shirt with a slogan. I could show up in my hats. I can show up with certain things on my computer as stickers or different things like that, and it's okay. So my company is special, I think, in that regard, and that's where it goes back to the values. That's what I'm trying to tell you as well. So, and other companies are being forced to deal with that. I honestly believe that some companies that do not allow people to be their authentic selves, I think they would decrease in size and decrease in their revenue generation as a result of quenching that down. And I believe that some of the companies that will embrace it, but figure out a way to also make it a welcoming for all different viewpoints, will be in a better position financially and will attract top tier talent and will look at all viewpoints as a way of making the company stronger and their offering stronger.
for sure. Yeah, I mean, I think that's, during this time of COVID and all the social justice movements that are happening, it really is putting pressure on companies. So, what do you think you would say to a company that's never done that before or been afraid to have these conversations? How should they approach it? I think there's a lot of fear there that they're going to do the wrong thing.
Well, the great thing about the time period in which we live is that you can reach out and talk with other professionals. So again, in our organization, our executives have their own cohorts across the industry. And so one of the things that I thought was really cool to learn was that my executives, like when everything was going to getting, was happening with COVID, for example, well, they were able to reach out to their fellow officers and executives and kind of have a phone call and be like, hey, how are you all approaching it? What's going on? Let's have an exchange idea, that kind of a thing, to be able to kind of work together. And it wasn't about being competitors or being in different industries. It was about, we have a responsibility, and at the same time, we don't want to do something run of the mill and do something. So one of the first things I would say is reach out and don't be shy and talk
Mhm.
with other cohorts. Establish some cohorts, and basically also don't sugarcoat it and just say, we're nervous about this. What should we do? How should we keep this in mind? And to leverage a network. So that would be the first thing, because you know it all depends on your industry, depends on your area, depends on the makeup of your organization, depends on the space, depends on your customers. There's a lot of things. There's no easy way of doing it. For example, maybe your company does consumer work, but then they also have government agencies that they deal with. Well, what if certain people in the company take exception to some of the government agencies that you work with, and vice versa? So without having that discussion and dialogue with other companies who have gone through that to be able to navigate that, I think that it would be a huge misstep for an organization that doesn't take time to first have some dialogue, be vulnerable, and state what your end goal, what problem are you trying to solve, and learn from other people before you make a step. Instead of making a step, making a misstep, and causing harm to your company that you may never be able to recover from.
Sure. Yeah, that's really good. Um, and then Talking about, giving advice, what do you think you would say to people working in HR? So, for one, people who maybe are new to the field and are trying to navigate this new HR climate that we have, where a lot of people are either, mostly working remote or they're working on site with all these new protocols. Um,
Mhm.
and then second to that, what would you tell people that maybe have been in the field for a long time and are now adjusting to this new way of working?
Mhm. Well, I think number one, um, network. I that's one of the biggest things, and you and I have talked about this quite a bit. Um, I think that it is extremely important for a new HR professional or a professional that's been in HR for a while to network with people across not just the HR discipline, but in other areas of the discipline. The HR profession is becoming more and more business focused and more data focused. So networking to learn from one another, to really challenge one another, I think is advice I would take. The thing that COVID really has taught us was you are a video conference away from having a really in-depth and rich discussion, and people are accessible. I have been able to have conversations with people that otherwise would not be possible unless I bought entry into a very expensive conference. But because they can no longer get out into the speaking circuits and different things, guess what? I've been able to have an audience with people like that. So that's one thing I would do for starters. Number two is build up your understanding of the fiscal language of your business. And I'm not talking just I'm talking about understanding again how your company makes money, but I'm also understanding the intricacies of who in the supply chain help the flow within the company to ensure that we make money and understand what they do and connect those dots. Even if you are in a transactional HR role, to understand that is still very important and adds value and helps you even in your role, like whether you're doing benefits, whether you're doing comp, whether you're doing IHRS, business partnership, learning and development, whatever the case may be. So I think that's important. The other skill set that I would say that a lot of folks need to really embrace, if they have not already, is not not just data analytics, but learning how to do analysis, but also learning how to tell a story with that analysis, because numbers don't lie. And if you know how to harness that information as an HR professional, whether you're new in your career or you're established in your career, people will follow the numbers. And if you tell a good story, those are actionable, regardless of the discipline. People will respect that. So I would say networking, strong network, learn as much as you can, understand the fiscal language of the organization and feel comfortable with it. Understand the supply chain and the connective tissue of what helps or impedes the making of money in your company. And then really strongly being oriented toward analysis with data, but storytelling with data in a simplified way that drives decisive action with the end user or the person that you're partnering with.
Awesome. And then as we close out, I guess I just have one final question and I'll let you, end it however you'd like, if there's anything you want to add. But my final question is, I know you love working in HR and I'm right there with you. Can you tell me what maybe you think is your favorite or maybe a couple favorite things you just love about your job?
Yeah. I'm really, as a business partner, one of the things that makes me really proud is many of the executives that I started to work with, to see them go off and to be successful as a result of our partnership, as that being one of the ingredients that helped them get to the next level. I've been real fortunate to work with a few executives that I've been able to be partners with, and see them go from, let's say, a director to all the way a CEO. And I've been able to work with some folks that have been able to achieve that. I worked with one executive that was a general manager that now is not only a CEO, but he's a chairman of a board of a conglomerate, and we still keep in contact to this very day. I also like to see people that I've interned who have interned with me that are now managers themselves or professionals themselves or people who have worked for me and that are leading their own departments. That is awesome because you had a part of that in helping them get there. The other thing is I keep in contact with so many of the executives that I've worked with and the people that I've worked with that if I need something or need to ask them something, we still keep in contact. I'm able to get that. Those are ways that we can, because you really think about it, when you achieve intimacy with these people, and especially executives, they can't be intimate with anybody else. If you really think about it, they can't. It's not like they can think out loud with their team because it would freak them out.
Mhm.
If you think about the ideas and what goes through the mind of a CEO, what goes through the mind of an executive vice president or a CFO, they can't think out loud all the time with their teams because it would be like, whoa, does that impact me or not? So you really quickly you formed a safe place for them to be and to be themselves. And you pride and I take pride in that. In knowing that I get a chance to know a whole completely different side of an executive that some people will never know. And that's one of the things that I really, really enjoy about being an HR professional.
Awesome. Anything else you want to add?
I know I think this is a great medium, and I'm glad that we had this discussion. I'm glad that you're providing a vehicle for people to talk about HR in a different way. I don't think anybody, including yourself, that's one of the reasons why we've had contact so much over the years, because we don't look at HR in a traditional way. We are not the HR of yesteryear, and it doesn't have to be. And so I'm thankful for this opportunity and what you're doing. And I would encourage you to keep pushing the envelope with who you bring on and what you do with your company, because it's needed. Who wants to do something that's already done? I say break the mold and just push it and see what else you can get accomplished.
Yeah, love breaking the mold.